Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my new video where we are going to be doing my top 5 tips that I think every single Renata player needs to know. Now, I'm going to put timestamps at every single point of my video. They're going to be up at the top of the page, as well as down below. The scrolling bar is going to be segmented into the different sections. So if you already have a good understanding of the tip, or you want to skip this intro, I recommend that you use those timestamps. Now, my goal behind this video is to make you guys a better League of Legends player, as well as to give you a better understanding of the champion as a whole. I'm a little bit limited with this format, only doing 5 tips. So if you have your own tips about Renata, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Maybe it'll help out someone else that might stumble across this video. And with all that out of the way, let's get right into the tips. All right, jumping into tip number 1. If you don't get anything else out of this video other than this, I think that this is going to be very, very helpful. And that is jump into a practice tool and get really used to her alt flash timings. You have a really long cast bar that you can see, and you want to be flashing right at the end of it and giving a really nasty surprise to the enemies, and also increasing the range by a just huge margin. As you can see here, when you do not flash the ultimate, it goes to about right there, and if you are alt flashing it, it's going to go even deeper, and it's going to be even harder to escape. So just getting a good understanding of the alt flash mechanics is going to be crucial when playing Renata. Now, you can't do any other flash plays with Renata. As you can see here, you can do a Q flash, but it's still coming out of your original point, as well as the E flash. It's still going to be coming out of the original point. You cannot E flash, unfortunately. You can't E or Q flash, which kind of sucks, but you have the alt flash play. So keep this in mind and get really used to the timing and where you're going to be able to do a alt flash play, because this is where you are going to be able to set up the most amount of one team fights and essentially the most amount of times you can carry games around these objectives with Renata, where a lot of her power really lies. And that will wrap up this tip. Alright, and for the second tip, we're going to talk a little bit about vision. I know it's something a little bit small, but I think that these small incremental gains in game knowledge can really help people just improve their overall kit. Now, so if you did not know, hitting a Q will give you vision of the enemy target, but it does not give you vision of the surrounding enemy targets. So be careful of getting baited in by landing a Q on one target and thinking he's all alone when he actually has a whole bunch of enemy champions around him. So as you can see there, the R is going to give vision of the area that it is affecting, but the Q is not, and then the E is not as well. So checking bushes, if you land a Q on an enemy champion, say you're clearing wards, a very common thing that is going to happen when you're in Dragon. You can see that one target, but if you are seeing, you're not going to be able to see that second target. As you can see by the text right there, the target dummy is there, but you are not able, the Q is not giving any vision. And again, your R is going to give vision of all of those enemy champions. So keep this in mind and do not get caught out when you are warding pre-objectives by getting baited in thinking that there is only just one champion there. And that will wrap up tip number 2. All right, getting into tip number 3, we really need to talk about the leverage passive. This is probably the biggest mistake that I see a lot of Renatas doing when I am laning against them, and that is their inability to weave in leverage as much as possible, because particularly in the early game where the bot lane is really decided and who is going to be strong and who is going to be weak, you really want to be maximizing the amount of procs you are getting off of your passive. Now, obviously, you can only have one target marked at a time, and you can switch the mark at any time. There isn't any sort of cooldown, so you really want to always have that mark down on someone that is your ADC is focusing. So a really simple trading pattern would be something like this, where you would do an auto, hopefully your ally is proccing that Q, and then recast your Q auto and E auto, and just weaving in an auto between every single spellcast is going to be extremely effective, similar to what Leona does with her Sunlight passive, where if she hits a target with a spell, it's going to increase the amount of damage of your next ally's effect on that target. So essentially, you are just a really big buffing machine. You're giving people movement speed, attack speed, you're giving them an extra damage proc out of your passive, and you can be very punishing. However, you really need to make sure that you are weaving in auto attacks on the target that is being focused as much as possible, and not just waiting for abilities. She has a really nice auto attack range. As you can see right here, you can auto attack from relative safety depending on the enemy champions, obviously. So you want to keep this in mind when you are playing Renata, and that will wrap up this tip. All right, and getting into tip number 4, I want to talk about the dream engage that you can look to utilize when playing Renata. Let's just fix up these minions a little bit, just so it's a little bit more realistic. Not everyone's just in a line. So what it's going to look like is you want to start it off with Shurelya's. You're going to hit a Q, R flash, and then Q the enemy into the other enemies. Now, it's really important to understand that when you are getting this engage, flashing in is going to put you in a very rough situation. However, with the R berserk, the enemies are going to start attacking each other, and they are not going to be able to focus you. So this is just a really big highlight play, and the reason why we want to hit our Q first and then R flash in and then Q2 is so we can stun the enemies in the time that they are looking to get away from your R. This is very, very important. Then obviously we're weaving in E's and auto attacks dependent on the different states. You don't want to be using your E in a poor position where your ally is going to need a shield in a second, but you use it just to get a little bit of extra damage, and then obviously using your W where needed as well, because Renata is all about timing, and you really don't want to be just using things in poor spots. However, if the enemy team, you are just crushing them and running them over, and all you need to do is a catch, this is a extremely strong play. And then you just speed up someone with a little bit of extra CC. Maybe that's a Malphite, and when you do the QR flash play and into the Q2, he just Rs all of them and the game is pretty much won. So keep this in mind. Using this combo, I think, is going to be a very, very great way to set up a lot of strong plays with Renata, and that'll wrap up this tip. All right, getting into the final tip, we're going to go over 2 micro tips that are very niche and can help you eke out very small advantages in particular situations where you are going to be able to push those and eventually be able to just snowball those into really big victory conditions. So the first one is using your bailout, similar to how a Blitzcrank uses his W to close a distance and get in someone's face and land a Q. Now this is very, very high risk, high reward play, because if you don't have your bailout in the ensuing 2v2 scrimmage, you can get in trouble pretty quickly because it is a very high cooldown spell, similar to I mean, as long as how long like a Blitzcrank Q is in the early game. It is a very important spell. But if you know that you're going to win the 2v2, say you have a really strong lane bully ADC, something like a Draven or a Tristana, where you know is all you have to do is land a hook or a Q and you should be able to win the fight, this is the time for you. So you want to sit a little bit in the bushes. This buff lasts a long time and is a ramping movement speed, so you want to wait until it's really at a higher movement speed threshold than just at the start and running at someone, because it doesn't start really getting strong until a little bit later. So you want to keep that in mind. And then obviously closing the distance and then landing the pick and then getting the Q and throwing them into your ally that you know you can win that certain 2v2 situation with. The next thing I want to talk about is kind of a smaller micro tip, is when you throw out your Q, it doesn't matter what you do afterwards, you can still do a recast of the Q2. You can build as much distance as possible if you're not a slow boomer like me, and hit the Q2. Okay, we have to really okay. All right, so what I am trying to put together is that there is no leash on the Q2. So if you hit a Q1 while walking away, and you are going to be able to recast your Q2 as long as you're not a big boomer like me. But the understanding is you don't have to stay in range to recast your Q2 on the enemy target. You can be walking away as you go, you can be building distance, you can be flashing away, you can have maybe you can take a lantern and you still will be able to recast your Q2. It does not matter how far away you get from the enemy champions, and sometimes it can be beneficial to hold on to the Q2 right until the end when the enemies are running in a straight line to get to you as quickly as possible when they're chasing you down the lane, and then hitting them with that little bit of a micro stun that you can hit because they're walking in a very, very particular pattern. Excuse my newbiness and not getting the Q2s early, but again, it's just I wanted to illustrate that point. If you have any questions for me, or if you want to comment your own tips, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the champions. There's a lot of really small intricacies that are really cool on this champion. I know I wasn't able to cover all of them, so As always, guys, take it easy.